Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today our group will present on our final year project, which is our research name is a study on career progression and on gender stereotyping, patriarchal work environment, gender roles in Majlis Agama Islam Selangor, which is Mais. So this is the table of contents of our research. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Nur Syafiqah Atirah binti Abdul Rahim and my group member is Nur Hana Alia binti Johari. For the research background, gender differences in professional growth, which are constantly a source of contention in every country. Gender inequality is a situation in which people are treated differently based on factors such as recruiting, compensation, policies, the relaunch process, and gender bias. Career progression is the act of moving forward in careers such as process of climbing the ladder during working life. The Global Gender Gap Index was created by the World Economic Forum as a tool or framework for analyzing and comparing gender differences around the world. Malaysia is ranked at 104th among East Asian and Pacific countries, despite the fact that women participate in highest number in educational institutions than men. Women are underrepresented in positions such as lawmakers, senior officials, and managers. According to Gregor and O'Brien in 2016, even in fields where women have traditionally dominated, such as the feminine occupations of nursing and childcare, women remain underrepresented in management roles. For the problem statement, gender discrimination makes employees emotionally brittle, turning the employees from simple, peace-loving people into paranoid, distrustful, afraid, and angry people. Besides, men had greater possibilities in getting high-paying jobs than women in most European countries, as well as Japan, South Korea, Israel, Australia, Canada, and the United States. In Malaysia's case, Othman and Uthman 2015 highlighted the forms of discrimination faced by women at work, while more women are part of senior officials and managers, jumping from 4.8% in 2000 to 14.9% in 2021, the number is still relatively low. The reason for this delayed progress is that women are discriminated against terms of promotion because of some factors regarding to the gender, such as gender stereotyping, patriarchal work environment, and gender roles. Males are favoured for leadership jobs in Malaysian enterprises, according to the male management models. Besides, this bias practice also explains the country's female pay discrepancy. Despite the government's proclamation that private corporations must have at least 30% female board members, it was discovered that 38.4% of publicly traded companies have no female board members at all. Therefore, the study aimed to address the following problems, such as what patriarchal work environment barriers, negative stereotype, and gender roles determine women managers' career progression in the workplace. The problem was that many people view gender differences in the workplace as a trivial matter, causing many workers, especially women, to experience difficulties in their career progression, such as difficult to get promotion, unfair treatment, salaries that were not in line with what they should be.
Next, for the research question, the first one is was there any relationship between gender stereotyping among industry with career progression? Second, was there any relationship between patriarchal work environment with career progression? And lastly, was there any relationship between gender role with career progression? For the research objective, the first objective is to identify the relationship between gender stereotyping among industry and career progression. Second, to examine the relationship between patriarchal work environment and career progression. And lastly, to determine the relationship between gender role with career progression. For the conceptual framework, it consists one dependent variable, which is career progression, and three independent variables, which is gender stereotyping, patriarchal work environment, and lastly, gender role.
Next, for hypothesis development, for gender stereotypes, H01, there is no significant relationship between gender stereotyping and career progression. H1 concludes that there was a significant relationship between gender stereotyping and career progression. For patriarchal work environment, H02, there is no significant relationship between patriarchal work environment and career progression. H2 concludes that there was a relationship between patriarchal work environment and career progression. For gender roles, H03, there is no significant relationship between gender role and career progression. H3 concludes that there was a relationship between gender role and career progression.
We move to the research methodology. The first is research design. which is the quantitative and the unit of analysis, the individuals who is an employee at the Majlis Agama Islam Selangor Mais. And for the sample techniques, the stratified random sample, which is SRS, and the sample is 165 respondents among employee at the Majlis Agama Islam Selangor Mais. And for the data analysis, the first one is descriptive statistic, mean and standard deviation, percent correlation, multiple regression. For the data measurement, all variable is being measured using Likert scale. And lastly, for the data collection, for the section A is a respondent information, section B, gender difference in career progression, section C, stereotyping among industry, section D, patriarchal work environment, and lastly, section E, which is a gender rule. For our finding, this is our demographic. For the gender, the female is our majority of respondent, which is 59.9%. And for the age, the range of the 31 until 40 years old is the highest of our respondent, which is 34.7%. And the marital status, most of our respondents are married with whole of 58.5%. And the rank position, the majority is a support staff that shows 46.9%. Next is the duration of employment. The highest one is 2 until 5 years, which is stated there 34.7%. And for income, the majority of the respondent is a range of RM 2,501 until 3,500. And lastly, for the last demographic is the question of, do you believe that men and women are treated equally at workplace? And the majority of respondent answer is yes, which is the percentage is 63.3%. Next, for the main finding, the first objective is to identify the relationship between gender, stereotyping among industry, and career progression. And the analysis we use is a Pearson correlation. And the result that occur is R 0.448, P 0.000, and we can conclude that we accept the HA1 and reject the HO1. For the second objective is to examine the relationship between the patriarchal work environment and career progression. And the analysis we use is same, which is the Pearson correlation, and the result that occur is R 0.423 and for the P 0.000, and we can conclude that we accept the HA2 and reject the HO2. And for the third objective is to determine the relationship between gender role with career progression. And the analysis we use is a Pearson correlation. And the result that occur is R 0.579 and for the P 0.000. And we can conclude that we accept the HA3 and reject the HO3. And lastly, the last objective is to identify the strongest predictor that influence gender difference in career progression in Majlis Agama Islam Selangor Mais. And the analysis we use is a multiple regression, and the result that occur is R square 0.372, and for expectancy for the gender stereotype, which is a beta value, is 0.233, and the significant value is 0.006. For the patriarchal work environment, the beta value is negative 0.36, significant value is 0.076, and lastly the gender rule, the beta value is 0.0490, significant value is less than 0.001, and we can conclude that gender rule is the strongest predictor compared to the other independent variable. We move to the research limitation, which is the first one is limited number of independent variable. This is apparent in this study, which discuss only 3 independent variable to identify gender difference in career progression. And the first one is a gender stereotyping, patriarchal work environment, and gender role. This has limited the findings in this study, which could be more reliable if more information was obtained through other variables. Second is the small sample size. The sample size in this study is 165, which is the number of employees of Majlis Agama Islam Selangor Mais. As Sakaran and Boji 2016 note in their sample size guide, this can be presumed that to be non-relative because the number of responders is somewhat below the necessary rate. Both sources suggest that an adequate sample size for a population of more than 100,000 should be at least 384 to obtain more accurate results.
The first recommendation is job security. Job security is the condition in which a person is assured that they won't lose their current position, be demoted, or be prevented from being promoted by their employer. Job security depends on several variables, including safety, satisfactions, economic conditions, organizational performance, opportunity, and qualifications to promote gender equality and prevent gender inequalities. The government of Malaysia ought to have established a law guaranteeing employees' positions so that their employees couldn't terminate or demote them as they pleased. As a result, job security policy will ensure employees' rights and eliminate the possibility of gender differences between employees and employees. The second recommendation is to build an inclusive company culture. It was found that gender differences in the workplace happen because of the toxic culture in the company. The employer should have taken steps to create an inclusive workplace culture that forbids gender disparity in all company departments. For example, women can gain from working with other women. 1 in 5 women claim that they were frequently the only woman or one of the only women in the room at work. Women in technical roles and senior positions experience this twice as frequently. Women who work alone typically have a worse experience than women who collaborate with other women, and around 80% of only face microaggressions. As a result, women who experience microaggressions frequently are more likely to quit their jobs, experience sexual harassment there, and have their credentials questioned. Therefore, companies need to be more courageous in fostering inclusive cultures so that everyone feels supported at work. The last recommendation is to focus on diversity during recruitment and promotion process by implementing a job specification program. The hiring procedure used by the company is the first step in achieving gender equality in the workplace. By writing inclusive and accurate job descriptions, identifying a pipeline of candidates with a variety of gender identities, and performing fair interviews work towards creating a diverse and equitable workplace. Besides, the company have to make sure that employees should only do the tasks that are in their job scope to prevent gender differences from happening. Additionally, the business ought to have evaluated employee performance and quality of work without taking gender into account. Therefore, every company should have implemented a program that will elaborate and provide detailed information on the duties and responsibilities of each position inside the company every time they accept new workers.
Next, for the future research suggestion. The first one is the researcher broaden the area of the study and expand the sample size. Researcher can acquire more detail about the subject of gender difference in career growth by having more response from a large scope of the study. In the future, researcher would need to observe a large region rather than a smaller one. Therefore, researcher can gain even more dependable and realistic results to work on, that resulting in more accurate outcomes. Second is to explore the use of mixed research method. The mixed method study combines qualitative and quantitative methodologies. The qualitative method collect and analyze non-numerical data, whereas the quantitative method collect and analyze numerical data. Using a mixed strategy is advantageous since the result obtained can improve comprehension of the study problem and questions more than using one method alone. And lastly, to broaden the scope of his or her investigation to include the rural area, researchers should study rural location organization to analyze gender treatment pattern in both rural and urban setting. As a result, by researching rural area in deep, researcher can learn more about pupil engagement, those who prevent it and those who receive it.
In conclusion, this research seeks to determine whether differences in career growth between men and women are influenced by factors including gender stereotypes, a patriarchal work environmental, and gender roles. Based on the previous study, there are 3 factors found that are highly related to gender differences in career progression. These variables are gender stereotypes, patriarchal work environment, and gender roles. To know whether these 3 variables are related to gender differences in career progressions, this had been conducted in Majlis Agama Islam Selangor, which is Mais, in Shah Alam. With that, it is believed that this study may help the government and society in raising awareness and designing strategies to reduce the case of gender differences in career progression in Malaysia.